For nearly 2,000 years, one book has captivated, terrified, and mystified readers like no other. The Book of Revelation, also called the Apocalypse, sits at the very end of the Christian Bible, filled with bizarre visions of multi-headed beasts, falling stars, plagues, and the ultimate battle between good and evil. Its imagery has inspired countless works of art, music, and literature. It has been used to predict the end of the world more times than anyone can count. But what if everything we thought we knew about this mysterious text was wrong? What if the apocalypse wasn't really about the end of the world at all, but contained a secret message that was meant for a specific group of people living in a very specific time? And what if understanding this secret message could change everything we think we know about history, faith, and the power of resistance against oppression? This is the story of how scholars, historians, and theologians gradually uncovered the true meaning behind one of history's most enigmatic texts, and how that discovery revealed a message of hope that transformed the world. The mystery that puzzled generations. Book of Revelation begins innocently enough. A man named John, exiled on the island of Patmos, receives a vision on the Lord's Day. But what follows is anything but ordinary. John describes seeing a figure with eyes like blazing fire and a voice like rushing waters. He witnesses 7 seals being opened, each unleashing new horrors upon the earth. He sees a woman clothed with the sun, a 7-headed dragon, and a beast rising from the sea with 10 horns and blasphemous names written on its heads. For centuries, readers have asked the same questions. What does it all mean? Was John describing literal events that would happen in the future? Was he having hallucinations? Or was something else entirely going on? Throughout history, people have been absolutely convinced they were living in the end times described in Revelation. During the Black Death in the 14th century, many believed the plagues and death described in the book were finally coming true. In the year 1000 AD, as the first millennium approached, panic spread across Europe as people prepared for the apocalypse. More recently, countless preachers have set dates for the end of the world based on their interpretations of Revelation symbols, only to be proven wrong time and time again. But what if all these interpreters were missing the point? What if they were looking in the wrong direction entirely? The key to unlocking the code. The breakthrough in understanding Revelation came when scholars began to seriously consider the historical context in which it was written. Instead of treating it as a timeless prophecy about our future, they started asking a different question. What was happening in the world when John wrote these words? The answer to that question changes everything. John wrote the book of Revelation around 95 AD during the reign of the Roman Emperor Domitian. This was a time of intense persecution for early Christians. The Roman Empire demanded absolute loyalty, and emperors were increasingly claiming divine status. Citizens throughout the empire were required to participate in emperor worship, burning incense and declaring Caesar is Lord. For Christians, this presented an impossible dilemma. Their faith declared that Jesus alone was Lord. Refusing to participate in emperor worship wasn't just a religious statement, it was an act of political rebellion. Christians faced severe consequences: loss of jobs, social ostracism, imprisonment, torture, and execution. This was the world John and his fellow believers inhabited. They lived under constant threat from the most powerful military empire the world had ever seen. Speaking out directly against Rome meant certain death, but remaining silent felt like betrayal of everything they believed. John needed to send a message of hope and resistance to suffering Christian communities, but he couldn't do it openly. If Roman authorities intercepted a letter calling for rebellion against the empire, it would mean immediate execution for both the writer and the recipients. So John did something ingenious. He wrote in code, cracking the symbolic language. The bizarre imagery in Revelation wasn't random or the product of fevered hallucinations. It was a carefully constructed symbolic language that would be crystal clear to John's intended audience while remaining opaque to Roman authorities. Let's look at some of the key symbols and what they really meant. The beast from the sea. In ancient Jewish literature, beasts rising from the sea represented evil empires. The particular beast John describes, with 7 heads and 10 horns, is actually a reference to Rome itself. The 7 heads represent the 7 hills of Rome, a detail that would have been immediately recognizable to anyone in the ancient world. Rome was famously known as the city on 7 hills. The number 666. Perhaps the most famous symbol in all of Revelation is the mysterious number 666, the mark of the beast. For generations, people have tried to find this number in everything from barcodes to computer chips, but the original audience would have known exactly what it meant. In ancient times, people used a system called gematria, where letters had numerical values. When you apply this system to Hebrew, the name Nero Caesar adds up to 666. Nero was the emperor who first viciously persecuted Christians, and even though he was dead by the time John wrote, he represented the evil of imperial Rome, Babylon the Great. Throughout Revelation, John refers to a corrupt city called Babylon the Great, describing it as a prostitute drunk on the blood of the saints. Babylon was the ancient enemy that had destroyed Jerusalem and exiled the Jewish people centuries earlier. But by using Babylon as a code name, John was actually talking about Rome, the new empire that was now destroying Christian communities. The dragon, the great red dragon that appears in John's vision, represents Satan, but it's also a symbol for Rome and its emperors. In the ancient world, dragons were symbols of chaos and evil empires. The dragon has 7 heads, again connecting it to the 7 hills of Rome. When you understand these symbols, the entire book transforms from a confusing collection of weird images into a powerful political message. Rome, for all its military might and pretensions to divinity, is not eternal. It is a beast, a monster, a tool of evil that will ultimately be defeated. The emperor is not a god, he is a servant of the dragon, destined for destruction, a message of hope and resistance, once we crack the code. We can see that Revelation wasn't primarily about the distant future. It was about giving hope to suffering people in John's present. The message was clear and radical. Don't give up. Don't compromise. Don't bow to Caesar, no matter what threats you face. Rome seems all-powerful, but its doom is certain. God sees your suffering, and justice is coming. This message would have been extraordinarily powerful to early Christians. Imagine being part of a tiny, powerless minority being crushed by the greatest empire on earth. Your friends are being arrested, tortured, and killed. Every day you face the choice: deny your faith and live, or remain faithful and risk everything. The pressure to simply give in and conform must have been overwhelming. Into this situation comes John's letter. Yes, it's written in strange symbolic language, but you understand what it means. And what it means is this: the empire that seems so powerful is actually already defeated. History has a direction, and it's not toward Rome's eternal dominion, it's toward God's justice and the vindication of the oppressed. Your suffering is not meaningless. Your resistance matters. Hold on. The Book of Revelation was essentially an act of literary resistance, a pamphlet for the resistance movement written in code to evade imperial censorship. It assured Christians that their struggle against an oppressive empire was not futile, that choosing conscience over convenience was the right choice, even when it cost them everything. Why Rome didn't understand? You might wonder, if Revelation was really an anti-Roman document, why didn't the authorities suppress it? Why was John only exiled rather than executed? The answer lies in the effectiveness of the code. To Roman authorities, if they encountered this text at all, it would have seemed like religious ramblings about angels and demons and other worldly creatures. They wouldn't have recognized themselves in the beast or the dragon. They wouldn't have caught the significance of 7 heads or understood the gematria that connected 666 to Nero. The symbolism drew on Jewish apocalyptic literature, a genre that developed during previous periods of persecution and oppression. This tradition used cosmic imagery, angelic messengers, and symbolic numbers to talk about earthly political realities. Roman authorities unfamiliar with this tradition would have missed all the references. It was the perfect steganography, hiding a political message in plain sight by disguising it as religious mysticism. The impact that echoed through history understanding. Revelation's true message helps explain why it had such a powerful impact on the development of Christianity. This wasn't just a book about scary monsters and the end of the world. It was a declaration that following conscience and faith was worth any cost, even martyrdom. It taught that empires rise and fall, but justice ultimately prevails. It gave dignity and meaning to suffering and resistance. This message sustained Christians through centuries of periodic persecution until Christianity eventually became the dominant religion of the Roman Empire itself, a dramatic reversal. That must have seemed impossible to those early believers hiding in catacombs and facing lions in the Colosseum. But the impact didn't stop there. Throughout history, oppressed peoples have turned to Revelation and found in it a message of hope. During slavery in America, enslaved people found comfort in Revelation's promise that the oppressors would face judgment and the suffering would be vindicated. During apartheid in South Africa, the book provided a vision of justice that sustained the resistance. In Latin American liberation theology, Revelation's critique of empire spoke directly to communities facing political oppression. Even in modern times, people living under authoritarian regimes have found in Revelation a template for resistance, a way to speak truth to power when direct speech is dangerous, an assurance that systems of oppression, no matter how permanent they seem, will eventually fall. What we can learn today. The story of Revelation's secret message teaches us several important lessons that remain relevant today. First, it reminds us that context matters enormously. For centuries, people misunderstood Revelation because they didn't consider what it meant to its original audience. They imposed their own fears and circumstances onto the text instead of trying to understand what John was actually saying to his community. This is a lesson that applies far beyond biblical interpretation. We often misunderstand messages, art, and ideas when we rip them out of context. Second, it shows us the power and creativity of resistance. When people cannot speak freely, they find other ways to communicate. Throughout history, oppressed people have used art, music, coded language, and symbols to express what they could not say directly. Understanding this helps us recognize resistance in places we might not expect to find it. Third, it demonstrates that messages of hope matter. The early Christians who received John's letter were in genuinely desperate circumstances. They could have given up, compromised, or simply disappeared into history. But John's message, that their suffering had meaning, that justice would prevail, that holding to their convictions mattered, helped them persevere. Stories and messages that give people hope and purpose have real power in the world. Finally, the story of Revelation reminds us to be skeptical of those who claim to have figured out exactly when the world will end. For 2,000 years, people have been using this book to make predictions that turned out to be wrong. The original message wasn't about predicting future dates. It was about giving people strength to face their present challenges. The secret that changed everything. The book of Revelation, properly understood, is not primarily a timeline of future events or a roadmap to the apocalypse. It is a masterpiece of resistance literature, a brilliant piece of coded communication that encouraged persecuted believers to hold fast to their convictions in the face of overwhelming pressure. The secret message was this: the empire is not eternal. Your oppressors are not gods. Justice will prevail. Don't give up. Don't bow down. You are on the right side of history, even when history seems to be crushing you. This message changed history because it gave early Christians the strength to survive persecution and eventually transform the Roman Empire itself. It provided a model of nonviolent resistance through steadfast conviction. It assured the powerless that their choices mattered, and their suffering was not meaningless. Today, understanding Revelation's true nature and original message strips away centuries of misinterpretation and reveals something perhaps more powerful than prophecies of the end times, a testimony to the human spirit's capacity for hope and resistance, a reminder that empires fall and justice, though delayed, ultimately comes. The apocalypse was revealed, not as a future event we should fear, but as a message of hope that was always meant to change not the end of the world, but the hearts of those living through dark times, giving them the courage to stand firm until dawn broke. If you found this exploration of hidden history fascinating, please follow our channel for more stories about the secret messages, forgotten truths, and surprising revelations that changed our world. Don't forget to like this video and share it with anyone who loves uncovering the real stories behind history's greatest mysteries. Your support helps us continue bringing you content that challenges what you thought you knew and reveals the extraordinary truth behind the ordinary. Thank you for watching.